So hello and thank you all for joining us for the third in-person training. This training will be recorded. Just wanted to let everyone know. Again, this is the in-person Food Establishment Educational Forum training. We will also have a Spanish virtual training on November 12th. I see some familiar faces out here, so I appreciate all your attending and some new faces as well. So thanks again for joining us. Please be sure to sign in at the table in the front if you haven't already, and we will give you a folder with some handouts, which we have a list here. And in the folders, we will be referring to some of these handouts throughout the presentation, so have them available. And we also have some bilingual trifold brochures in the back table. So you have an English one in your folder, but we do have alternate language brochures in the back as well. So please feel free to take those as well. We also have a feedback survey that is in the front pocket of your folder that you're free to fill out as we go through the sessions. Here, so basically, how is the training workshop, how can it be improved? What is the one thing you took away or learned from the training? What additional training topics you would like to see? We really appreciate your feedback because that does help us guide towards future trainings and what we want you to cover for you guys to help you guys out. We will email copies of these slides out to all participants after all feedback is received and incorporated. So this will be to share with your additional food service staff that couldn't be here today. So everyone has the latest version of the slide presentation. So please be sure to sign in with a current email address if you don't think we have it. You can put that right on the sign-in sheet for us. So we're going to be doing our training a little different this year. Some inspection staff will be presenting, specifically Pamela Ross-Kung, Sineth Palani, and Amy McKierney, including myself, Tara Gurge, Assistant Public Health Director. Sai is our environmental health agent, and Pamela is our Needham inspector. Amy is our regional health agent. Monica Pinkera is a Needham health agent, and Sam Menard is assistant manager of shared services and lead trainer. Sam and Amy are with the Charles River Health District, which is our shared services team who work collaboratively with the towns of Needham, Medfield, Dover, and Sherburne. So we have some existing staff that you may recognize, and we also have some new staff. So we're lucky to have such a good team. Here's a copy. So the agenda is here. As you can see, we have a lot of exciting food safety topics to cover with you. Along with covering some updated information on our Food Safety Excellence Program revised food code enforcement policy, which we hope you'll find helpful. For this first agenda item, which I'll be presenting, I will be able to take some brief questions at the end of that session if needed, but keep in mind we need to stay on track since we have a packed agenda. So for the remainder of the presentation, we ask that you please hold out your questions to the end. So we hope you enjoy this presentation, and our goal is to provide helpful food safety and sanitation training to all restaurant and food service employees, and for you to leave with some great educational food safety information that you can share with your staff. So I will get started. I will be covering the Food Safety Excellence Program. You guys should be familiar with this. We did cover it last year a little bit during our presentation last fall. So I'm going to give a quick overview of what this is about and what our expectations are. So the Needham Public Health Division's Environmental Unit is responsible for making sure that retail food service establishments are following proper food safety practices that protect public health by reducing the risk of foodborne illnesses. Standardized environmental health agents and inspectors perform comprehensive routine risk-based inspections of all permitted retail food service establishments. Depending on the risk level of the establishment, we may conduct routine inspections anywhere from 1 time a year up to 4 times a year. So for 4 times a year, for instance, that would be for highly susceptible populations, such as hospitals or nursing homes. We also do increase inspections for establishments with a history of non-compliance. A little bit more about our program. Needham Public Health Division has evaluated the Food Safety Excellence Program by piloting it for 6 months, so back from November 2023 till the spring of 2024, and we were able to incorporate constructive feedback received from surveys issued to food establishments and inspectors to help improve our policy. So I'm going to review some of the main updates to our policy. For the initial scoring, we had a Priority Foundation violation had a deduction of 7 points. Our Priority Foundation violations were a deduction of 5 points, and our core violation was a deduction of 2 points. After receiving the feedback, we adjusted our scoring, and now our priority violations are a 5-point deduction, our priority foundation violations are a 2-point deduction, and our core violations are a 1-point deduction. So we feel that that works better for Needham. It's less strict, and it brings everybody into that fair ground. So we appreciate your feedback with that. So again, I want to review a little bit about where these scores are located. As you can see, we have an excerpt of inspection report. They're located in the top right-hand corner. You have the score listed, the priority violations listed, the priority foundation violations listed, and the core violations listed. And also it gives you a count of the repeat violations. So we have that listed on the upper right-hand corner for your inspection report. A little bit more about the policy and program. Next phase will be the initiation of our ticketing and fining system for repeat high-risk violations, which is started in October 2024. A flat reinspection fee of $150 will at the start of the second reinspection. That has always been our protocol. If you have priority or priority foundation violations written up on your initial inspection, you get one follow-up inspection to correct them. If we see those same violations at the third reinspection, that's when that fine will get ticketed. Fee will be assessed, the $150 fee. We hope you don't have to go that far, that you'll have it corrected within the timeframes in the food code. The initial ticketing we had during the pilot was that certain priority violations were a $50 fine if that same violation was observed at the second reinspection, and then certain priority foundation violations were also a $50 ticket if that same violation was observed at the second reinspection. For adjusted ticketing and fines, now we have all priority violations are ticketed at $100 each violation if that same violation is observed at the second reinspection. And then all priority foundation violations will get a $50 ticket at that same time frame at the second reinspection. Again, our goal is to be more proactive with taking care of those priority and priority foundation violations, because those are the highest risk violations, and we want you to be able to correct those in a timely manner. So fees and tickets will be assessed by the health agent at the time of the second reinspection and will enter a citation on the inspection report. A total will be added to the online application of your food establishment permit, and all fees must be paid in full in addition to permit fees to renew your annual food establishment permit. And as you can see, we have an excerpt of how those fees and fines will be assessed. They'll be on your food inspection report. And you see that we have a citation of 60 that will be marked, and then we will have the details there on what the fines and fees are. And our inspector will review that at the conclusion of your inspection. And we also put together a flow chart, which is our next slide, on kind of the rundown of what I just described. So in the green bar, again, this gives you initial reinspection and first reinspection, priority foundation and priority violations. I'll start with them. Priority violations need to be corrected within 72 hours. Priority foundation items must be corrected within 10 days. A reinspection will occur at a date set by the health agent for the above violations. Core items must be corrected by a time frame set by the health agent, usually within 30 days or up to 90 days. For the second bar, the yellow, that's the second reinspection when these fines and fees can be assessed. So for the second reinspection, a $150 fee will be issued at the second reinspection. If we see those same violations, again, the ticketing system kicks in. So a $50 fine will be issued for each outstanding priority foundation violation and a $100 fine for each priority violation that remains uncorrected. And then we have the red bar, which is the third reinspection. Again, fees and fines will be assessed, and then also it will trigger representatives of the establishment will be called in for a formal administrative hearing. Just of note, and I'll review that blue bar as well, if no violations are found or cited, violations are corrected on site. That is our goal, to have those violations corrected if at all possible. They will still be marked on your inspection report as a priority or priority foundation violation. But if you correct them on site, you're less likely to have us come back to do a reinspection. Scoring, if assessed, a score is 60 or below, the risk category will be increased by 1 level, and the establishment will be called in for administrative hearing. The closure comes up if an imminent health hazard to public health is present, and the assistant director, myself, or a designee may need to issue an emergency order to close a food establishment without a hearing. So we want to make sure we don't get to that point. We want to make sure we correct our violations and be proactive. A little bit about our policy. So our food code enforcement policy focuses on reducing the frequency of high-risk violations observed during inspections. So again, these are the priority and priority foundation violations. Standardize health agents and inspectors, identify risks during inspections, and write up orders to correct on a form of a standardized inspection report. Tickets and fines will be issued when a high-risk repeated violations are found and not corrected in a timely manner, which is set forth in the food code. And an inspection report score of 0 to 100 has been added to gauge compliance to food safety best practices. The ultimate goal is to have our food establishments strive to achieve a high score by being more proactive by practicing consistent food safety standards. The goal is also to reduce risk factor violations that contribute to the incidence of foodborne illnesses and other negative outcomes. So again, if a food establishment has seen a pattern of receiving repeat high-risk violations and continues to receive low scores, our comprehensive enforcement plan becomes initiated. For example, if a food establishment has a pattern of receiving repeat priority or priority foundation violations, fines will be issued if not corrected. Or if they receive very poor scores, for instance, less than 60, management will be required to meet with the Public Health Division to develop an improvement plan, which could include the owner hiring a food safety consultant for a set time determined by the Needham Public Health Division at administrative meeting. Our policy also states that if food safety issues continue to persist and insufficient improvements are observed after all actions noted above, the restaurant owner and manager will need to attend a public Board of Health meeting where a decision will be made by the board on the next steps. And again, we don't want to get to that level, but that is built into our policy. You are required to post the signage conspicuously to customers as they enter your establishment. We've added a QR code to this because now with our policy, we're now making your inspection reports available to the public. And so the public can actually now scan this QR code and it brings you right to the website where the inspection reports are listed. And we do have redacted inspection reports on the website, so we don't have any PIC names or inspector names or pictures. So they're just like a copy of the redacted report can be accessed from this QR code. So we gave everybody a copy of the signage in their folders, so we encourage you to have that and post that when you get back to your establishment. So, okay, that concludes my session. So why don't we go on to the next speaker? Thank you.
Hi, everybody. How are you today? Again, thank you for coming. It's great that Tara's kind of telling you about our program, right? Our food safety program, and sharing with you the enforcement policies. Of course, as inspectors and as food operators yourselves, we want to avoid enforcement actions, right? We also want to avoid violations if we can, because now that these inspections are being posted and now that they're being scored, there's every reason for us to try to work together to keep violations from happening. So one of the things that we've been doing for several years now is compiling a list of violations that are recurring, because the whole point is you don't want them to be recurring. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be using the mic. So anyway, one of the things that you want to be thinking about in terms of making sure that you don't have repeat violations or any violations if possible is thinking about active managerial control. When we talk about active managerial control, we're talking about having a person in charge at your facility at all hours of your operation that knows your operation, that can answer questions if we're conducting an inspection about your operation, specific processes, especially things that relate to risk factor violations. You remember there are 5 risk factors that we need to think about. We're going to talk about a few of those again today when we talk about some of the recurring violations. All right? Another thing that a lot of people don't know is that when it comes to having a person in charge, the code has certain areas that they expect the person in charge to be knowledgeable about, and they have certain duties that they expect persons in charge to be able to fulfill. If that's not happening when we come in to do an inspection, that can lead to violations as well. So in your packets, you have 2 handouts. I'd like you to take them out. They're the second 2 handouts on the right-hand side. One of them is entitled Demonstration of Knowledge, and the other one is Duties of the PIC. And a lot of you may not be aware that these are listed in the food code. And this is what we look at when we come in to do an inspection. If we're observing something and we're not sure whether or not you're aware that it's happening or you're aware how to correct a problem, we're going to ask you some questions. You should know about this. You should look at these after today's session and make sure that the person that you're leaving in charge can answer these questions and is capable of fulfilling these duties. As we go through the slides today, things are going to come up in yellow highlight. Those yellow highlighted sections are the questions we may ask during an inspection if that violation is cited, or it's the duties we expect your staff to be performing when we come in to do the inspection. All right? I'm not going to go through all of them right now. Okay, you've got the handouts and you'll be seeing it on the upcoming slides. But know that each of these sections can lead to violations, and they would be priority foundation violations. Do you remember how many points a priority foundation violation is worth? Yeah, the foundation one. 2 for the foundation. How many for the priority? 5. All right, we changed from last year. Okay, but still 2 points, right? Think about this. We walk into a facility in the sandwich unit. The top section of the sandwich unit is not functioning properly. The temperatures are 47 degrees. So we look at the person in charge and we say, did you know that these are 47 degrees? And the person in charge says, oh yeah, we can't possibly get them down to 41 degrees during peak lunch period. Is that a person in charge knowledge problem? No, they knew they had a problem, right? But is it a duties problem? Did they stop it from happening? Did they correct it? Did they keep it from happening? No. So that becomes a violation under duties. Now let's flip it around. We asked the person 47 degrees on these temperatures. Did you know this? No, I had no idea we had this problem. Is that a knowledge issue? Yes, it is. Could it also be a duties issue? Yes, it could. So that's 2 violations in one, plus the cold holding violation because you weren't holding foods at 41 or below. That's 3 violations in one. So you need to think about these things. Really look at these lists when we're finished here today. Ask your PICs, could they answer these questions? Is your staff following the duties required that you want? You set the procedures up, are they following them? Okay? We want everybody to be successful. Plus, we don't want to have to keep writing violations, right? It's very time consuming. So some of the recurring violations that have been happening, we're going to start with time and temperature ones. And again, as I said, when you get your slides, you're going to see these slides that have highlighting. These are the knowledge-based items that we would be looking to ask questions about if we found some time and temperature issues. And in the second part, we'd be looking to see if your staff is performing the duties that are expected of them. Most of the time, we'll be looking to see if the PIC is doing what they're supposed to. But we can also ask the staff questions, especially if it's something that's related to their duty. If somebody's cooking chicken and they're taking it off and it's not at the right temperature, and we ask them, what should the temperature be? And they can't tell us, that's a duties issue, folks, okay? As well as the violation for improper cooking. So just really think about this, okay? So what we're finding is recurring here in Norwood over the past year, cooling. We still have places that are not cooling foods properly. Some of you we've already talked to about it, but there are a lot of new places and a lot of new faces. Remember, you have to reach 70 degrees Fahrenheit from 135 in the first 2 hours. If you've never done a process verification in your establishment to find out if you can do that, I recommend you do it now. It's a simple case of taking a temperature after you cook it and then watching how long it takes to get to 70. If you find you bring it out at, say, 180 degrees and you can't get to 70 degrees in 2 hours, that might be okay. Start the clock at 135 because that's where the clock starts from a regulatory standpoint. All right? You might be able to get from 135 to 70 in the first 2 hours, but you can't get from 180 to 70 in the first 2 hours. That drop to 135 doesn't count, okay? But then you have to get to 41 in the next 4 hours. Now, if you're able to chill that food to 70 degrees in the first half hour, you get 5.5 hours more to get it to 41, right? Because it's a 6 hour total, but you have to reach it in the 2 stages, all right? We're finding a lot of places that aren't doing this, and we'll ask them, have you ever done a verification process? No. So do it before we find out that it's not being done properly. Number one, you don't want to make anybody sick, but number 2, it's a priority violation, and food could be discarded. All right, food's really expensive nowadays, plus the labor involved in making it, Not a good thing. What are some factors that it can affect the cooling of foods? I would normally ask you, but because we're limited on time, I'm going to tell you. If it's a roast, you can cut it into pieces. If it's a large ham, you can cut it into pieces. If it's a turkey, you can cut it into pieces. If you try to cool a 10-pound roast in a cooler without cutting into it, it is not going to reach 70 degrees in the first 2 hours from 135. It won't happen. We've done plenty of verifications, and it just doesn't work. You have to know that you're going to have to cut into it. A turkey, probably not either. A 25-pound turkey, you're going to have to cut it. All right? You can use shallow pans. You can cook it in whatever size pan you want, but then put it down into 2-inch shallow pans. The type of container that you use is going to make a difference. Metal's a better conductor. Things cool down faster in metal. They stay cold better in metal. But again, if you can't afford metal, it's okay, but it's just better if you're having problems. If you can use an ice bath, right? So you can actually immerse the pan right in ice water, or as much ice as possible. Keep stirring it. If you don't stir it, it won't cool quickly. It'll just stay hot in the middle. Think about it, right? That cold is only going to go so far, and then it stops. You have to stir it. You can also use a blast chiller. Some of you are fortunate enough to have a blast chiller. They're expensive. They take up space, but if you could get one, it would be great. You don't have to get a big one that holds 100 pounds of food. You could get a small one that only holds 50 pounds of food. It's just an option. It's like an under-counter reach-in. So just something to think about if you're struggling with cooling hot foods. You can add ice directly to the food. If you use an iced wand, be careful. Make sure you're stirring the food. Don't just think the ice wand is doing the job for you. It's not. It acts like a suction cup. And what will happen is it'll stay hot right around the wand and not cool the food. Try it yourself if you don't believe me. All right? When you cool the foods, if you put them in the cooler, you're not required to cover them. We will not write you up a violation for not covering foods in your cooler unless there's some type of environmental contamination that you would worry about. If that happens, you can cover it loosely with like plastic wrap. You can cut little holes in the plastic wrap to allow the air to come out. You could slant your lid so that it's not quite tight on there, but you don't have to cover it until it's fully chilled. Okay? I put this slide up to show you some of the different cooling aids that they have, but the main reason I put it up is I just found this out. You see that, the one on the far right, it's a cooling wand, but you see the different shape? Most of the time I've only seen the upright cooling wands. They now have them that look like that, and they take up so much surface area. It's awesome. It cools stuff down so quickly, and it fits perfectly in a 2 to 4 inch hotel pan. So that's something I just discovered. And the other thing is blankets of ice. You can actually put them over the top. I'll put them right inside the product. I actually use ice blankets at home when I'm trying to cool marinara sauce. They wash, they're fine, you can sanitize them, it's all good. The other thing we recommend, as I said earlier, is maybe to do a process verification. And that would be simple. You just take your food, you write the product, the temperature that you started at, when did it reach 70, when did it reach 41. If you don't meet the 2 parameters, you change the way you cool the food. Maybe you change the container. Maybe you change the amount that you're trying to chill. But you want to find this out before we do, okay? If you want a copy of the form, we're more than happy to send it out, okay? Hot holding. We're seeing an uptick in hot holding violations. Primary reason, what do you think? That could be that we're not stirring it. Yeah, because you have to do the same thing every time. Cold food, hot food, cooling foods. You have to keep agitating them. What else? That's one. Not reheated quickly enough. How? How? Exactly. So they're taking it right from the refrigerator and putting it directly into a steam table or a hot holding unit. That's not what these hot holding units were designed to do. They were designed to hold a previously heated food. So if you're not cooking it in an oven, a microwave, a stove before you put it in the table or the countertop unit, you're not going to be able to get 135 degrees or above when we come in. Okay, be careful. Stirring it is also important. All right, and what else? Setting the dials, right? A lot of times you'll set the dial, but then you turn it down and you forget to turn it back up again. Or the water in the well is not hot to begin with. Don't forget, if you have a steam table, you have to have the water hot before you put the product in. And usually, I find most of the time 150 is the minimum you want to be at if you really want it to hold properly, okay? But it depends on your unit. So, play around with it and figure it out. Don't forget, 135 or above, or it's a red critical violation, okay? Cold holding, similar kinds of situations. We've had some really hot summers this summer. I mean, look at it today, right? So your units are working pretty hard. Your kitchens are usually hot. Most of these units are across from your stove or your grill, so they're going to work even harder. It's your responsibility to figure out a way to keep those foods cold, whether it's putting ice underneath, whether it's covering it, whether it's using a metal pan, whether it's coming up with a device. And the reason I put this slide up is because there's so many new pieces of equipment that will allow you to hold foods cold. When I started in this field many years ago, everything was so big and clunky and really expensive. But now you can get things so tiny it's ridiculous. They'll fit, and maybe you only need them during peak periods of time. Okay, so think about it. They're all available. I'm not endorsing anyone, but I found all these things on Web Restaurant. So they're not hard to find. And the one I love the most is the Cool Check system. That particular little container right there is the same size as most of your hotel pans. You can get all different sizes. You put them in the freezer. The gel becomes frozen. You put the food in it. It holds it cold. Even if you're holding your product at 80 degrees on the side of your line, it will get you at least 4 hours for your peak period. It may not get 8 if your kitchen's 80 degrees, but if you put it inside a unit where the unit's already cold, you're going to get 8 hours. So just things to think about. There's equipment out there that will help you. And another thing, I almost forgot, and it's the only session I remembered to do it, pre-chilling items before you put them into these units. If you just finished slicing tomatoes or lettuce or cold cuts, or you just made tuna fish from a can, you have to make sure you pre-chill these things before you put them in your cold holding units. Once they're there, that's a red critical violation. If they're in the cooler and they're in the midst of chilling, it's not a violation. But the minute you put it in cold holding device, it becomes a red critical violation. So be careful. Pre-chill when necessary. Okay? And I'm going to turn it over now to Amy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amy. I'm the regional inspector. I don't think I've actually met any of you, so nice to meet you in this setting. We are going to talk a little bit about date marking, why it's important, what processes we recommend that you use, and what we're looking for during inspections. So date marking is exactly what it sounds like. You are marking the date on a food item so that you're able to assure that it's in your establishment for the appropriate period of time. Why is this important? Well, when you're keeping something in refrigeration, you might be thinking, well, it's 41 degrees or below. That kills a lot of bacteria. It's fine. But there actually are some bacteria that do grow at temperatures below 41. Does anyone know a bacteria that grows in colder temperatures? The hint is on the screen. Someone want to say it out loud to me? Listeria, thank you. Yes, so Listeria does grow as low as 32 degrees Fahrenheit, so it will grow at refrigeration temperatures if the food is in there for long enough. So this is why date marking is important, because we want to make sure that we are staying at 7 days, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that process. So here are the code citations, the Mass Food Code 590.003, and then the 2013 Food Code 3-501.17. This essentially says that any ready-to-eat TCS refrigerated food that you have, you must date mark if you're having it in your establishment for over 24 hours. So I do want to make a note of that. If you are prepping something and you're either going to sell it or discard it in less than 24 hours, you don't have to date mark it. But if you are prepping something and you're keeping it in your establishment for longer than a day, 24 hours, you need to date mark. I also want to make a note that if we go into your establishment and there's no date marking at all, that is something that we're going to consider that you should be discarding that, because we have no idea how long it's been there for. So how do we do the math of how long your food items have been in the walk-in for? So 7 days total, right? So I want to ask all of you what day we're going to consider day one. So do we consider, you're going to have you raise your hands in a second. I'm going to give you two options. Would you consider day one the day that you prep it, or would you consider day one 24 hours after? So who says day one is the day that you prep? Raise your hand. Okay. Who says that day one is 24 hours after you prep? Good. You all got it right. So day one is the day that you prep. This is a point of confusion for some people. Some people consider the day that you prep to be day zero. And it makes sense when you're thinking about the code of like, oh, well, you know, I only start to date mark after 24 hours according to the code, so that first day doesn't count, right? No, if you're keeping it for longer than 24 hours, day that you prep is day one. And then you do +6 after to figure out your discard date. So what about commercially processed foods? Foods that you're not actually prepping, but you're receiving and they're ready to eat. So we're gonna consider the prep date here, the day that you open that packaging. So when you open that packaging, that is your day one. You can keep it for 7 days after that, and then you must discard. One thing to note with this is the manufacturer's date on this packaging. So let's say you open something on December 1st. So you're like, all right, December 1st +6, December 7th, that's when I can discard, right? Usually yes, but if the manufacturer's date is something like December 4th, somewhere it falls in that 7-day period, you have to get rid of it by the manufacturer's date. We have to follow that according to the code. So please be mindful of that and plan ahead. If you know that something is going to be expiring according to the manufacturer's date soon, you're probably going to want to open it in advance if you would like to get the full 7 days out of it. Okay, so what about combining ingredients? Let's say we have the example on the screen. We're making vegetable chili, and that was prepared on site December 4th. So you take that 4, add 6 days, that brings us to December 10th as the day we need to discard. Great. But let's say on December 5th, we add some ground beef. We are not going to reset the clock because we added ingredients. Yes, that ground beef is new, but because you're adding it to something that was prepped the day before, those original ingredients have already been in refrigeration for 1 day. So we need to make sure that we're keeping to the 7 days. So you will not reset the clock. You will still discard on December 10th. So if you do want to get the full life, 7-day life, out of all of your ingredients, I would just recommend prepping it on the same day if you can. Otherwise, you're just going to have to accept that the ground beef portion is only going to be in there for 6 days. Okay, so now we know how to date mark, we know what that process looks like, but how should we actually be doing it? What does the system look like in our establishment? So that really can vary. It's really up to you. The best recommendation, I think, is what is easiest according to the code, is putting the discard date, and then best practice is also putting the prep date as well. We do expect to see the discard dates unless you do have a process that is more unique, which we'll get into in a second, but you should be doing the discard date so it's very clear, and then best practice is to also add that prep date so that all your employees know exactly when this was made, when it needs to go. And also as inspectors, it's really clear to us what your process is and that we know that you know that it's there for 7 days. If you do want to do a more unique system, you're more than welcome to. We can talk about that more in the questions section in the end if you want to know more. But if you do something that's different than just like prep and discard date, you are able to, but you need to do a written standard operating procedure that you keep in the establishment so that you can train employees on it and they can refer to it as needed. And you also need to give it to the health department so that we can approve it. We make sure that it's still meeting the code's guidelines, and also so that we, when we go into an inspection, know what your process is and aren't confused about it. So how can you label products? You can make this as simple or as fancy as you would like. You can actually order stickers that look just like that, where it has the product name, which is really helpful. You had to do that anyway for a different part of the food code. And then the date that you would discard. There's also some stickers out there that go by the day of the week, might be color coded. They have the prep and discard date. You can really find a whole variety. If you don't want to go that route, you can also do something as simple as masking tape with a Sharpie. And you just write the name of the food, the discard date, and you put it on the container. And you just have to be mindful that you take it off, which would also work with the other stickers too. Just make sure that you're constantly rotating them as necessary. The other important point here is no matter what system you use, no matter what kind of labels you use, they have to be legible. So we don't want to come in and see anything like what is on the right there where you did technically date mark it, but no one can read it. Us as inspectors can't read it. We have no idea how long it's been there for, and we're assuming your employees can't either. Maybe the person that originally wrote it knows what date it is because they remember writing it, but no one else is going to know because you can't read it. So at that point, if you can't tell us when it was supposed to be discarded for and we can't read it, we're going to ask you to discard it because we have no idea how long it's been there for. So make sure that no matter what you use, nothing like that happens. What about freezing food? So let's say that you prep something, you keep it in refrigeration for 2 days, and then you decide that you want to freeze it for a certain period of time before you take it out again. The best practice for thinking about freezing is that it stops the clock but does not reset it. So if you have something in refrigeration for 2 days, you put it in the freezer and you take it out, that does not mean that you have an additional 7 days to work with. It has still been in refrigeration for 2 days, right? So you only have 5 days left. And you have to make a note of that when you put it in the freezer and when you take it out of, this has been refrigerated for 2 days, it only has 5 days left, and you're going to have to update that discard date accordingly. It's probably not going to be the original discard date. So just be mindful of those things and make sure that you are still sticking to that 7-day rule of refrigeration. It's really important. All right, so there are some exemptions to date marking. There's a couple of slides about this, so we're going to go through this first one. First is individual meal portions from a bulk container. So things like deli items, hot bar, over-the-counter salads, items like that, and then live shellfish, which usually you just go by the use-by date from the vendor or when the shellfish actually die, because of course you don't want to sell any products that have passed away. And so the vendor use by date is probably what's going to be important here. You do not have to do your own date marking for that. This is some more exemptions. And of course you can read through them. I'll go over a couple. But there's various cheeses, hard and semi-soft, cultured dairy products, preserved fish, shelf-stable, dry fermented sausage, etc. And then certain deli products. So we want to make a note here that not every deli product is exempt. For sure. Things like deli meats that you're cutting, you absolutely have to date mark. Those are a great harborage point for bacteria like Listeria. But if you have a commercially processed salad that you include, you can go by the manufacturer's date, which might be a little longer than 7 days, just because they usually have preservatives in them that lets them be good for longer. And then finally, this is a handout that you have. I forgot to mention this, but you have a couple of handouts related to date marking with the code citation and best practices. But your last handout related to date marking is this list of hard and semi-soft cheeses. And the reason why is because these cheeses actually have factors that will control Listeria growth for longer than 7 days in refrigeration. So things like microorganisms that are competing within the cheese, pH, salt concentration, water activity, and so forth, that actually makes it more difficult for Listeria to grow. If you do have a cheese in your establishment that is not on this list that you think should be exempt, you think you can have it for longer than 7 days, you're more than welcome to pursue that. You can either submit lab results from your manufacturer or some other sort of proof from the manufacturer saying that you can keep it for longer and it can be exempt. And as long as you send it to us and we approve it, you're more than welcome to do that. Okay, so now we're going to switch gears a little bit, talk about cleaning and sanitizing food contact surfaces. Yeah.
In the beef chili example, if you were to bring the chili up to 165 for reheat, add the ground beef freshly cooked, does that then start the 7-day clock again?
No, because the vegetables that were in it from before, when it was vegetable chili, are the original ingredients. So it goes by that first date. Good question. Okay, so again, we're going to recurring violations, okay? We've been finding a lot of issues with cleaning and sanitizing of food contact surfaces. So when it comes to the knowledge and duties, again, on the handouts that we gave you, you're going to find that there are knowledge questions that we can ask, and there will be duties that we will expect to be happening, right? So again, make sure you read these sheets when you're finished with this session. But I'm going to actually take this slide and kind of go through some of the things that we've been seeing and let you know what our expectations are. So a 3-bay sink. Wash water should be 110 degrees minimum. That doesn't mean that if we come in and we put our thermometer in the sink, it's not 110. It's a violation. But it means that the water should come out at a minimum 110 and be pretty close. It can't be 50 degrees. Can you wash dirty dishes in 50-degree water? Not likely. Okay, so we'll try to be a little bit common sense. Middle sink gets to be rinse. Third bay, sanitizer, whether it's chlorine, whether it's quaternary ammonium. We really haven't seen iodine, but you get to use iodine as well. Make sure you have a test kit. The test kit should be relevant to the type of sanitizer that you're using. If you have a low temp dish machine where you're using chlorine as an injection, again, you want to make sure that it's at the right strength between 50 and 100 parts per million, and you have to have a test kit. If you don't, it's a violation, all right? If it's not between 50 and 100, it's a red critical violation, all right? What we find with the low temp machines, most of them are at the bar, and a lot of times the bartenders don't know what it's supposed to be. Then they don't have a test kit, they don't test it. This goes back to person in charge knowledge, person in charge duties, okay? So be careful. The high temp dish machine, we're going to be looking for roughly 180 degrees, final rinse. We're going to run the dish machine. We're going to run the low temp dish machine, okay? We're going to expect you to have a maximum registering thermometer or temperature device to be able to make sure that if you're supposed to be 180 on your gauge, you're reaching at least 160 on the surface of the item that you're sanitizing. You can do this by using one of the thermal pucks. You can do a thermal label. You can have an actual temperature measuring device that looks like a digital thermometer that goes through the unit. Whatever you choose to use is fine, as long as you can get that maximum temperature. And why is this important for you? It's the difference, it could be the difference between a red risk factor violation or a core violation. Because if we come in and the gauge isn't working, and that's the reason why we're not getting 180, that's a core violation. You need to fix the gauge. But if the temperature isn't reaching 180, that's a red critical violation or priority foundation violation, depending on where it gets debited. So be careful, right? It also could be Friday night, your dish machine isn't working. What are you going to do? Especially if you have a place that doesn't have a 3-bay sink. You're not operating. All right, so keep an eye on your dish machine. Use your maximum registering device to make sure the surface is a minimum 160. If you use wiping cloth buckets, both a wiping cloth bucket or a 3-bay sink, we're probably not going to ask you to fill a bucket or fill a sink if you're not in the middle of using them, if the person in charge can answer our questions about it. But if they can't, we're probably going to ask you to fill a sink so we can test it. We're going to ask you to fill a wiping cloth bucket so we can test it. Make sure your wiping cloth buckets are at the right strength, have the correct test kit to use, and I'm going to tell you right now, your 3-bay sinks and your wiping cloth buckets are not going to last very long. They don't stand up to the debris and the detergent that ends up going into that bucket or into that 3rd bay. Change them frequently. The minute they fall below the required parts per million, it could be a red critical violation. Okay? Spray bottles. A lot of places like to use spray bottles of sanitizer. That's fine. But remember, A, it needs to be labeled. B, it has to be at the right strength. And the other thing is, you cannot sanitize a surface until you wash it and rinse it first. So if you haven't washed a surface with hot soapy water, rinsed it with clear water, and then use your spray bottle of sanitizer or your wiping cloth from your wiping cloth bucket, you have not sanitized. So you're literally using your spray bottle as you would an all-purpose cleaner, because it's not cleaning your surface and it's not sanitizing your surface. So be careful. Know what the intent is of your spray bottle, all right? And make sure your surface is cleaned before you sanitize it. It's a red critical violation if it isn't, okay? Wiping cloth buckets, they can't be on the floor. The code changed a few years ago. They can't be on a food contact surface. They can't be hanging above a food contact surface. You really have to get creative and find a place to be able to put these wiping cloth buckets. I know it's not easy, but we have to abide by the code, all right? So be careful. You don't want them spilling on any food or food contact items, all right? Make sure you have the right test kit. And the last thing is, you know the pull-up sanitizer wipes that sort of became really big during COVID? They're fine, but you want to make sure that you're using the wipes that are designed for food contact surfaces. We're finding a lot of places are using disinfectant wipes. That is not allowed on a food contact surface. They're too strong. That's not what they were meant for. If you want to rinse afterwards, that's fine, but that's not what you're using them for. You're using them so that you can wipe and move on. All right? Check your label, read it carefully, make sure that it's designed for food contact surfaces. Most of them are color-coded by the manufacturer, so you should be able to tell which one is for food. Okay? Red critical violation if you're using the wrong type of a sanitizer or chemical on a food contact surface. Okay? And then next, one more thing about wiping cloths. If you're using wiping cloths on food contact surfaces, if you're using them for both raw foods and ready-to-eat foods, they have to be 2 separate buckets. I know that we might have been a little remiss reminding you of this during inspections, so we're reminding you now. All right? Raw with one type, one bucket, ready-to-eat with the other bucket. Same sanitizer is fine, just can't use the same bucket to put that cloth in. Okay? And the last area that I'm going to talk about today, again with recurring violations, is poisons and toxins. If you have any type of a chemical on property, it's supposed to be stored in a designated area away from all food contact surfaces and all food and food contact items. That includes napkins, paper towels, single-service items, anything that could touch the customer's mouth. All right? Boxed products, it doesn't matter. Right? So keep everything stored, segregated from any food contact or food contact items. That's number one. Again, you're looking at your duties, right? Making sure that this is happening, making sure that everybody's following the directions on the particular chemical that you're using. All right? Red critical violation if these things aren't happening, or if they are happening, I should say. And the other thing that we're finding is that your sanitizer is being used at too high of a concentration. A lot of people think more is better. I walk into a place, the bleach will blow me away. I shouldn't even smell bleach. If you're using it at the right concentration on a food contact surface, we shouldn't even smell your sanitizer. If we walk over to your 3-bay sink and we can smell it and I'm practically choking on the fumes, you're way too strong. Right? If you're using your sanitizer at too strong a concentration, it leaves a toxic residue on the surface of what you've just sanitized. And that is a toxic issue. So that's going to be a red critical violation, and it's going to fall under Chapter 7 under poisons and toxins. So be careful. That bottle that's up there right now, that's practically full-strength quaternary ammonium. And this is not a picture that we made up. This is what we're finding in the field. So be careful. If your sanitizer is too weak, it's not doing the job. You're not effectively sanitizing. If it's too strong, then it's leaving a toxic residue. Either way, you're in a red critical risk factor violation. So be careful, okay? That's what I'd like to share with you for today, and it's been great. Now I'm going to turn over to Cy, talk about one of our favorite subjects.
So can anyone guess what I'll be presenting today? What's been a hot topic in town recently that some of you have been involved with me about? Can anyone guess? Yes. So I'll be talking about pest management, right? So over the past year, we've been receiving a lot more complaints from the public in relation to pests, particularly rats. We've also been witnessing a lot more rats. When we do respond to these complaints, we've been seeing a lot more incidences across the town, not just in one particular area. So what I'll be covering today is how you all can help us manage pests inside and outside of your establishments. And hopefully some of the takeaways from this section can be what are our expectations when we go out for inspections, and then how we will be handling situations where we do see signs of pests in and out of your establishments. Good. Okay, so all good pest management programs start with sanitation. I'm going to repeat that again. Sanitation is the most critical aspect to all good pest control programs. If there are pests within your establishment, there usually is a sanitation issue that is attracting that certain type of pest to your establishment. So, for example, if there's stagnant wastewater in your floor drains, or your floor drains are not being kept clean, this can create an issue with drain flies, which I've encountered in town before. Drain flies are terrible to deal with. Once you have an infestation, they kind of have these little hairs on their bodies that kind of prevent pesticides from getting to them. So they take forever to treat, and it's a real problem to deal with. So it's really important to have a maintenance program for your floor drains to clean them often and frequently. Another example for sanitation is if you have stagnant water, maybe by your dumpsters or outside, this can be a water source for pests such as rats. So I want to make sure that the exterior facility has the water is draining off-site properly, so there's no stagnant water. If you are smelling any type of sewage odor or that kind of odor in your establishment, it might be coming from your grease traps. So that could attract flies into your establishment. So taking care of these sanitation issues is really, really important before you start to think about using traps or poisons with your pest control operator. Does anyone know what this picture is from? What the bear? Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So what are our expectations? So first of all the surfaces within your establishment should be that required to be cleaned on a frequent basis due to your normal operations. Should be non-absorbent, corrosion-resistant, durable, safe, and smooth. So this allows for your establishment to be conducive to being kept clean and sanitary. So this means that your floors, walls, ceilings, your equipment, your racks, your wire racks, your plumbing fixtures should be made of this type of material. So if we don't see this and it no longer meets this standard and it's not being maintained as this way, it'll be a citation when we go, our inspectors see it, we'll be citing it as a violation. The second part of this is that equipment should be installed in a manner that allows for easy cleaning for your staff. So if your equipment's on legs, they should be at least 6 inches off the ground and also 6 inches away from other pieces of equipment and from walls. And this will allow your staff to be able to clean around those pieces of equipment, or the equipment should be on caster wheels. So after your establishment is conducive to being kept clean, there should be a prescribed cleaning program for your establishment. So cleaning should be done on a frequent enough basis that prevents persistent sanitation issues from appearing. And a good cleaning program should have should require consistency and a committed staff, and generally require some kind of dry cleaning method, which might include scraping or sweeping, or also wet cleaning methods such as mopping or using hot water and soap. It might also be important to set up a cleaning checklist so that your staff know what needs to be cleaned on an ongoing basis throughout your operations, perhaps, maybe at the end of the day, maybe on a weekly basis. It really depends on individual operations of what areas need to be cleaned on that frequent of a basis. So if we go on our inspections and we see that multiple areas are unsanitary within your establishments, and that happens to be a repeating concern, it generally indicates to us that you don't have this type of program in place where you're cleaning on a frequent basis. So what this will lead to is that we'll come back for a reinspection to ensure that that the kitchen's clean, and in addition to that, maybe mandate that you write up procedures to us, but with a checklist, so we know that your staff are actually cleaning on a consistent basis. I should also note that cleaning should only be conducted on a manner, time, and place that does not cause contamination to food. So you probably don't want to do this during your operations, depending on the type of area that you're cleaning. And a clean and safe, a clean kitchen is going to be a safe kitchen and also an efficient kitchen. All right, so after addressing sanitation, so this is about pest management. So after the sanitation aspect has been done, the next part is try to exclude pests from entering your establishment. So this is covered in the food code under this citation number. So if we do see signs of pests within your establishment, one of the first things our inspectors will do will be to check doors and your windows, to see if there's screens on them, and to see if there's door sweeps on your doors, especially if there's mice or insects in your facility. So if we do notice that, this will be the citation that our inspectors will cite for. Okay, let's say you handle all the sanitation matters and you've done all the exclusionary work that you can possibly do, and you still have issues with pests within your establishment. At that point, you should contact your pest control operator. I think most of you already have contracts with them, at least coming on a monthly basis. So if you do see these signs of droppings or damaged product, nesting, or the pests themselves, talk to your pest control operator about that. And then they should try to use integrated pest management program or approach to treating that particular pest. So each pest has a particular life cycle and a particular environment that they like to be in. So the pest control operator should acknowledge that and make a treatment program designed around that particular pest. All right, so this is the main citation in the food code about pest control. So if we do see signs of pests, basically the food code says that your establishment must be free of pests, inside and outside. So your premises should be free of pests. So if our inspectors do see pests, meaning flies or evidence of droppings, this will be the code citation that we normally would cite. This part of the code also mentions ways that the code recommends that you address and control for pests, and one of them is to routinely monitor incoming shipments of food. So when most of the time your shipments come in around like 5 or 6 a.m., we're not going to be doing inspections at that time, so that'll be more of a knowledge-based question. We'll ask your person in charge, how do they actually receive goods? What are they looking for on that when they are receiving them, other than just checking that they're receiving what they ordered, right? We also want to make sure that they're checking for pests on those shipments. Part B of this code also says that the person in charge should also be routinely inspecting the premises for evidence of pests. So that should be being done on a frequent enough basis where you know that there's no pests within your establishments, and it's definitely not being done if we come in and we see that there is evidence of pests. And then Part C talks about methods used if there are pests that are found, and this will include trapping or using poisons. This part of the code we got more clarification on. So what this kind of means is traps that require baiting need to be in tamper-resistant boxes that are covered. So this includes snap traps. Snap traps usually have bait on them, so if they're going to be within your establishments, they need to be in tamper-resistant boxes and covered. In addition to this, snap traps they create blood spatter, so they're by food contact surfaces. That blood could go into food contact surfaces, potentially going into food. And if they're left out for quite a while, pests can transmit that blood spatter to other areas of the kitchen. So just if we do see snap traps in your establishments, there'll be a code citation for that. We got in contact with the FDA about sticky traps and glue traps. That was a topic that was discussed during our inspections previously. The food code is silent on what the requirements for glue traps. Other than that, glue traps must be removed once a capture is made. And the reason for that is like a sanitation issue. If there's a mouse caught on a glue trap and it's starting to decay, it creates a sanitation issue. So once a capture is made, you notice that it needs to be discarded of immediately. All right. So in this slide is a picture, and this is a picture of a location here in Needham. And as you can see, there's multiple holes there. Those are called like burrows, and it was a rat infestation happening. So the way that I heard about this was that there was complaints a couple months prior to me figuring this out at a residential property where individual was having a rat issue in their house or around their house. And they had started contract with a pest control company, and then when I investigated it, I found more rats around that house, and they kept going outwards. And then this location is about half mile away. So this is at a food establishment. And I followed a track of dumpsters. Each of the dumpsters had evidence of rats along the way, and tried to mitigate the problem. So basically, it's really important to prevent this from happening because it kind of spreads really, really quickly. And once the infestation happens, it's really hard to control. And then right next to this location is a dumpster, a shared dumpster actually. So on the other side of that stone wall was this compactor. So in this case, I had the landlord clean up this compactor. I think the food establishments involved were not being diligent with throwing away the trash appropriately. And there was lots of food debris around this, and it was kind of feeding the rats in this case. So I had them replace the lids for this compactor and power wash the entire area and also gas the rats that were there. And then within a week, I went back to check out the site, and I saw that there was a chew mark in the lid already, and those new holes appearing. So it's once you have an infestation problem, it takes a long time for it to get addressed. So it's really important to prevent it from happening and prevent it from spreading to other areas. Because it does cost a lot of money, it costs lots of our time as well. So I wanted to talk about, in this slide, the importance of maintaining your dumpsters in the dumpster area itself. So it's really important that the dumpster area is kept clean, that the pad the dumpster is located on is smooth, durable, and easily cleanable, and also sloped to drain to prevent any type of standing water. And then also the lids of the dumpster should be tight-fitting and then kept closed between uses. And it's also really important to have intact drain plugs on your dumpsters. So the blue dumpster on the left, or the right for you guys, that's an example of one that's missing and one with a drain plug intact. On the left-hand side is an example. The green dumpster on the left is a picture of a dumpster in Needham. And this is a dumpster that's located by the other compactor area. So this is also by another food establishment that I discovered. And you can see how there's a trail of trash coming from the drain plug itself. The other problem with this dumpster was it was located on soil versus on pavement. So there's burrows all around this dumpster as well. So it's really important to make sure your drain plugs are intact. Usually the sizing of the drain plug is, I think, 3/4 inch like plug. So you can find them at like hardware stores usually. But sometimes they're threaded. So if you have a threaded drain plug, you might have to contact your waste hauler to get that installed. All right, so these are some review slides. I don't want to go through all of this, but you can look at it later on when we send you the slides. I also wanted to cover our local Board of Health regulations. So this has been adopted a while ago. It's a waste hauler regulation locally, and it requires that all commercial generators have the ability to separate the recycling products. The importance of this and how it relates to pest control is that if you have just one dumpster that is single stream for both your solid waste and recycling, it's more likely that your dumpsters will overflow. So if you're able to separate your cardboard boxes, because sometimes those cardboard boxes don't get broken down every night, if you're able to separate them, there's less likely of a chance of your actual trash dumpster from overflowing. In addition to this, we're looking to propose a new dumpster regulation. So many other towns in Massachusetts, or many other boards of health in Massachusetts, have adopted dumpster regulations for the Board of Health to be able to permit dumpsters and to regulate them more stringently. So that's something we're proposing, and we'll likely get a survey soon enough about getting feedback about that new proposed regulation soon. Okay, so something that's new that got adopted by the state in September of this year is that in the food code they have added sesame as a 9th major food allergen. So it's really important to know that because now it's codified in the food code. And then you should also know that it's also part of your duties and knowledge as persons in charge. So that's something that we will ask for on our inspections, to test your knowledge about food allergens. One of the new requirements is to post this brand new poster that lists all 9 food allergens. So I think this poster is in your packet. So please find that and replace this poster with the current one you have that only lists the 8 major previous food allergens. Also in your packet is some guidance from the state about this, and also an FAQ. And that's it. Oh yeah.
So again, thank you all for coming. Make sure you fill out your survey papers that are in your folder, because we'll be collecting them on the back table. And we appreciate all your feedback, because again, this shapes future trainings that we offer to you guys. So we really appreciate you coming out today, and thank you very much.